After many years of leaks and rumors, the Nintendo Switch 2 is finally here. And as someone who played a lot of Switch 1 over the past 8 years, I wanted to give you my first impressions and a bit of an overview of the hardware, and maybe even answer some questions if you're thinking about picking one of these up. Beginning then with the unboxing, I went with the Mario Kart World bundle, and here in Britain, we get a box inside of a box. Opening the lid on the first layer, there's the Switch 2 and 2 Joy-Cons. The left Joy-Con is this grey and blue combination, and the right Joy-Con is an orange and grey combination. Pulling out the screen itself, the Switch 2 is quite a bit larger than Switch 1. Now, even though Switch 2 does look like a Switch 1 from a distance, there's been a complete overhaul to its design. Firstly, the quality of the device just feels more premium in the hand. It feels more mature, more refined. There's larger ventilation cutouts on the top and bottom for better airflow. The kickstand has been redesigned and feels about as sturdy as an OLED Switch. The game card slot has been completely redone too, and it's much easier to open and close, and you can use this slot for both Switch 1 and Switch 2 games. There's also 2 USB-C ports so you can charge from the top or bottom, and a microphone for game chat. The Joy-Cons have also been completely redesigned and no longer attached to the Switch with a rail system. There's now magnets in the Joy-Cons themselves, and they just snap onto the side of the Switch. There's a button on the back which you press if you want to remove them. They still have the small L and R buttons, so you can use each one as a little controller, but the buttons are a little larger and they feel better to press. There's also now a mouse sensor, which I'll talk about properly later. On the second tray, you'll find a compartment with a couple of items. If you get the Mario Kart bundle, this is where you'll find your voucher to download the game. This is where you'll find the included HDMI cable, and it's also where you'll find a set of Joy-Con straps. These straps attach magnetically to each Joy-Con and give you a wrist strap for safety, but they also have small pads to presumably make the mouse mode even easier, which I'll talk about in a bit. These just snap on and you press the button on the back to release them. On the bottom tray, you'll find a Joy-Con grip that lets you attach your Joy-Cons magnetically so you can use them as a more traditional controller. Also included is a USB-C power plug and a USB to USB-C cable, which I do prefer because if you want a longer charger in the future, you only have to buy a cable and not a plug. This is also where you'll find the dock, which has been redesigned to now have better ventilation. Unlike the launch Switch 1 dock, there's also an Ethernet port included, and there's 2 USB-A ports on the side. Now for Switch 2, Nintendo's moved over to microSD Express up to 2 terabytes, and given that the system only has 256 gigabytes of internal storage, which is larger than Switch 1 storage, you'll still likely want to get one. Installing one is really simple. You simply lift up the kickstand and slot it in. I also bought the new Pro controller. From first impressions, the sticks feel a little tighter and the buttons are far less mushy. There's extra buttons on the back, which is a nice addition, but I wouldn't exactly say this was essential if you already had a Pro controller. Once it's all out the box, you can start to set up the Switch 2. This is pretty straightforward. You just connect it to the internet and let the initial system update run. You'll get the option at this point to transfer your data over from an existing Switch, which is what I opted to do. For this, both switches need to be updated and on charge and then close to each other. I had quite a lot of stuff on my old Switch, so this took about 10 minutes. Once you're all logged in and everything's been moved across, the Switch plays a little animation. Now the UI is almost identical to Switch 1's. You have a row for games, which then opens up into a big menu where you can scroll through all the things you've got installed or played previously with a game card. Along the bottom, you can access news, game chat, screenshots, and the eShop. Now, I haven't had the chance to check out game chat yet, but I did notice when setting it up, you need a mobile phone number to use the service. But I was able to test the eShop, and thankfully, it no longer takes a million years to open and is overall just much snappier. You can see which games are Switch 2 exclusive by looking at the banner on top, and then if you click on a game without a banner and scroll down, it'll tell you if it's compatible with Switch 2. Now, the last time Nintendo gave a figure, 60% of third-party Switch 1 games ran just fine on Switch 2. Now, the biggest change with how you interact with the UI is mouse mode. To activate mouse mode, you just need to place a Joy-Con on its side and it becomes a mouse. It moves around like a mouse, and then you can click with R or L, depending on which Joy-Con you're using, and scroll with the thumbstick. You've also still got access to A, B, X, and Y, which you can also use. Now, you can do this with the Joy-Con as is, or you can attach one of those provided Joy-Con straps straps. I will say though, and I'm happy about this, I wouldn't say it made it any more functional or comfortable, so you don't need to carry these around with you. You really want to use mouse mode on the go. You can use either Joy-Con as a mouse, which is good if you're left-handed, and you can swap between the two instantly. I think mouse mode is going to be a game changer for first-person shooters. I've got Cyberpunk arriving later, and Fortnite will also be getting it as part of an update next week. Now then, let me give you a first impressions on the handheld aspect of Switch 2. For specs, the screen is a 7.9-inch 1080p LCD with HDR10 support and up to 120Hz VRR. I'll be honest, I was a little worried I'd be let down after using a Switch OLED for a few years now, but I'm happy to say this is a very high quality panel. The colors are great thanks to the HDR, and the viewing angles are really good. It's not OLED-like, but I can't honestly say I feel like I'm missing out. It actually reminds me a lot of the screen that's used in the ROG Ally, which I really like. To my ears, the speakers sound very similar to the ones in the Switch OLED. For the size, they're pretty good. When it comes to docking Switch 2, it can be scaled up to 4K 60fps, or you can scale it down to 1440p at 120fps. HDR10 is still there if your TV or monitor supports it, but VRR isn't, which I'm hoping will come in a future patch. Now, as mentioned earlier, the Switch 2 is backwards compatible with Switch 1 games, and I'm happy to say that even without patches from developers, games benefit from being ran on Switch 2. For example, on Switch 1, Terraria takes 2 minutes and 20 seconds to generate a medium world, but that same world took 60 seconds on Switch 2. I did take a quick look at The Witcher 3 and compared it to the original Switch, and once again, even without a patch from the developer or some kind of Nintendo Switch 2 edition, the game just ran better and it loaded faster. Overall then, based on my few hours with the system, would I recommend it? Should you buy a Switch 2? I think if you're somebody with a big Switch 1 library and you just want to elevate your experience, you want to play in handheld on a bigger screen, and you want those performance gains just by playing on the Switch 2, it's a pretty compelling system. But if you want a Switch 2 just to play Switch 2 games like the new Mario Kart or Cyberpunk, which launched today, I'd maybe say hold off. The system itself is very high quality and I would say justifies the money spent, but if you look at it from just a Switch 2 software perspective, it's only day one and there's only a few things to play. But as I mentioned, if you already have a catalogue of Switch 1 games or you're planning to get a bunch of Switch 1 games and you want the very best experience, then I would grab one. I mean, I'm really happy with mine. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section down below. I'll try and answer as many as possible. But for now, that's it. Thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.